what exactly is the evil that Tucker and Dale are up against in Tucker and Dale versus Evil?
I don't know. It's good that you don't know. It's good that I don't know, because if we knew, then they would want to kill us too.
Is it just an insane hillbilly bloodline or crazy teenagers?
Looks can be deceiving.
Or is it something much, much bigger that can only be summed up in the word evil?
You have no idea what this is all about.
Maybe that what they are fighting is death itself, and that this entire film is secretly a part of the Final Destination universe.
Don't you get it? This is what it's all about.
Now, I know I sound crazy, but honestly, you should be used to that at this point, so I want you to just stick with me for a moment.
Think about it.
Just think of all of the insane deaths that are accidents that look absolutely crazy to our two main characters because they are watching all of this happen from an outsider's perspective.
Oh my God, that makes so much sense.
Not knowing why or even how any of this is happening, just that death is all around them.
Because in the end, no one can escape death.
And that all of it started because of what happened in the very beginning when a car crash was avoided.
Maybe they just didn't want you to know the truth.
There is no truth.
And that's just the start. So let's get ready to go with Tucker and Dale to our final destination at our cabin summer home, where death is waiting for a fight. But first we have to make a stop for our sponsor, which is me, because now I have merch, and that's still insane to me. But what better video for me to sponsor than what was originally supposed to be the 50,000 subscriber special, and then I missed it by just a couple. Okay, just by a lot of thousands of subscribers. So thank you for being here. If you like the content, be sure to check out the merch, because this is the best way to support me directly. And that'll be the best way to keep getting videos like this, because these take so much time. So once again, thank you. And thank me for sponsoring this video. And we get back to the video.
Are you sure we should be doing this? This is still a crime scene.
Now, the movie starts with some handheld video footage as they're entering into a crime scene, and it seems that this journalist and her cameraman are there to see what in the world happened.
You know, the police missed something here. I can feel it.
We don't get too much information about what exactly is going on here, but what I can tell you is that this is actually Eli Craig and his wife, Sasha Craig, and Eli is the director of this film. And Sasha also played the Yellow Lightspeed Ranger. Fun fact.
On your...
But that doesn't help either of them, as they're immediately attacked. And the attacker even gives us a little smile into the camera as we go back 3 days before whatever insanity is going on here. We're off in the Appalachian Mountains of West Virginia. We see a car full of college students that immediately almost get into a car wreck with an old truck pulling onto the road. Luckily, they just barely avoid this accident that would have definitely killed at least 8 of the people in the car, because Chuck is the only one wearing his seatbelt. I know what you're thinking. What do you mean they would have all died in this car wreck? This is a horror movie. These are all college students. They're not gonna make it through this. Now, I know what you're thinking. Polter, we didn't see a premonition. We don't know the list that these people were supposed to die in. And I have to remind you that these college kids are not our main characters. Instead, we are seeing all of this from the perspective of Tucker and Dale. So think of all of this as more of a outsider's perspective of what happens during a Final Destination film. And as a quick reminder, the basic plot for one of the Final Destination films is there's an accident that happens, somebody has a premonition, they get a list of everybody that should have died that didn't at that time, and then death finds a way to kill them off later on. So instead, we have to go through the film to piece together the order that we should have gotten here to figure out death's design. But I can tell you now, Chad here is the one that we have to keep our eye on, because it's made super clear that he is already unstable and that he would be the one that death would want most. And your other question is, why would he not say anything if there was a premonition? And we're gonna get there. Almost immediately forgetting about what just happened, they go back to talking about normal college stuff.
We were morons.
We wouldn't have thought to bring this.
Drugs. I don't know. I went to trade school. When just then 2 creepy hillbillies slowly pass them and stare them down the entire time. And just after they pass, we hear the real horrific news come from the back seat.
We forgot the beer.
Oh, no. So the college kids find their way to a convenience store where they can fix that problem, but when they go inside, they see one of the creepy hillbillies at the counter. This, of course, is Tucker, and we can hear him getting a list of building materials for some sort of project that him and Dell are headed to. But at the moment, Dell is nowhere to be seen. But who we do see is Allison, who has lost her boyfriend, Chad.
Do we need more bugs? Chad?
Now, Chad just disappears somewhere in the store. Don't know if he's just hiding behind one of the shelves or if he went to the bathroom, but I'm pretty sure that he is having a very important discussion about how the rest of the weekend is going to play out at this time. And I promise I'm not just making all of this up. Just stick with me for a little bit because it all comes around by the end.
Chad?
But what she does find is the other creepy hillbilly standing on the other side of the aisle staring at her again. She's so creeped out that she immediately leaves the store and Dell's left standing there with his pickled eggs trying to play it off like he wasn't just staring her down. It's here that we then get a switch from what seemed to be our main characters of the movie to the actual title characters of the movie, with Dell going outside with his 6 pounds of pickled eggs to talk to Tucker.
Pickled eggs, 6-pounder.
Now, I don't know if you've ever had pickled eggs, but a 6-pound container of pickled eggs sounds like a nightmare to me.
Don't choke, buddy.
But I have to say, I will forever be grateful for pickled eggs because it's the only reason that I made it to this point with making videos. That's right. My very first video was me trying pickled eggs for the first time. It didn't go well, but it got me here. It's clear though that Dell loves these pickled eggs as he begins to eat them, but what's really on his mind at the time are these college girls that he can't stop looking at.
Oh, hot dog, Tucker. Have you ever seen anything like that in your life?
And here Tucker, being a good friend and wingman, begins to talk Dell up and trying to give him confidence to at least walk over and talk to him. This is the kind of friend that you need because he comments on Dell.
You are a good-looking man, more or less.
He reminds him to bring up the vacation home to hopefully impress them. And he even gives him some advice on how to at least appear confident.
Whatever you say, just smile and laugh.
And it works because Dell is now so confident that he begins to walk over without realizing that he is still holding a scythe.
Going camping?
I don't think that's exactly what Tucker had in mind when he told him to smile and laugh. Because not only does this scare the girls, it also causes Chad to jump in to try to defend them against the creepy hillbilly here. Telling him to go away, Dell understands and sadly makes his way back over to the truck, where he then tells Tucker,
I hate my face.
Come on.
okay, so maybe he really doesn't understand why they reacted the way that they did, but as they drive down the road, they talk a little bit about how he can be better at talking to women as well as being more successful in life. And probably a good place to start would be to not drink and drive because now there's a cop fixing to pull him over. And all of this causes Tucker to drop his beer in his lap, which Dell then leans over to try to clean it up for him before the cop walks over, and then Dell's shirt gets stuck underneath the seat as he's leaning over onto Tucker as the cop is slowly making his way up there. Luckily, Dell figures it out just as the cop walks up, and now his shirt is all open, so the best choice is to just take it off. Totally normal thing to do, and the cop just looks at him and asks Tucker for his information. So Tucker gets him his temporary license and begins to explain that they're headed to their new vacation home that they're going to try to fix up and do a little fishing, and even brings up that Dell is
striking out the ladies. I figured a little man time might do him some good.
In response to all of this, the cop just gives them an ominous warning about the place that they're going to and tells them to get their turn signal fixed and sends them on their way.
That's weird.
Yeah, he's the weird one. What's that? An ominous warning from a man that lives in the area that knows more than anybody about what's fixing to happen. I mean, that's also just kind of standard for most horror movies that are like this, but it still fits the entire theory. If only this was Tony Todd making an appearance here, you wouldn't have any suspicions about where this is going, now would you? Rest in peace, Tony Todd. You were such an icon. And it's here that we finally get to see their vacation home that they came all the way out here to fix up, and it's this old cabin in the middle of nowhere.
It's perfect. And what'd they call this, a fixer-upper?
And they're so excited, and I'm just jealous. I mean, this would be awesome to have. Except for the stuff that they find inside, because there's bones hanging from the ceiling that they quickly identify as must have belonged to an archaeologist. Must have. But then they also notice some newspaper clippings on the wall of a brutal murder that happened in the area. No, wait, sorry, I got that wrong. They notice the coupon that doesn't have an expiration date. Looking around, they also find some board games and booby traps?
Oh, look out!
Dale just out here casually saving lives. That'll be a theme in this video.
Dreams really do come true.
Oh no! Somebody almost died and then was saved at the last second? Who would have thought? Now, if we have our little list that we can pull up here, it looks like Tucker is the first one on the list that should have died. But then he was saved, so he's going to end up getting bumped down, which is extremely confusing, but we're going to have a list, and I'm going to have to go over it on the back end once we figure out how all of this plays out. But I can tell you from trying to do the research for the last like 6 months on this video, Death's design in Final Destination is one of the most confusing things across all of the movies.
You told me Death has a distinct design.
And if you don't believe me, you can go and watch Jeffy's video as he figures out how Death's design works across all 5 of the films. And I just feel sorry for him because it made my head hurt. After Dale saves Tucker's life, we pick back up with the college kids who just got their camp all set up. And as they're talking about questionable dreams, Chuck begins to tell a scary story.
Want to hear a scary story? No! Chuck, no!
Okay, so Chuck tries to tell a scary story. Nobody wants to hear him speak, so Chad starts to tell a story. And it's the same story that we just saw the newspaper clippings for back in the cabin.
The Memorial Day Massacre.
Where he explains that it was not only 20 years ago, but it was 20 years to the day that all of this happened. Where a group of college kids decided to go off into the same woods that they're currently in to have a good time for Memorial Day. And just as they're pumping up the jam, somebody decides to take their cassette tape. Just as they start to play some creepy hillbilly music, and the culprit walks over with a saw blade, scratches his own neck for some reason.
No, this is cool, I like this.
And throws it into a guy's face, where some more hillbillies show up to chase down all the rest of the teens and brutally murder all of them as well, except for one. But as for the ones that didn't make it, their bodies are buried right beneath them. Now just remember this story because it's going to come back up later on as being the reason why Chad is Death's #1 pick. And I'm hoping that by the time Bloodlines comes out that this theory is going to make even more sense. And it's with these final details that Mike runs up, sniffs the roll of toilet paper in his hand, and lets everybody know that there's a lake just down there and that they should all go skinny dipping.
Hey, there's a lake back there.
Nobody asks any questions and they just say, yeah, let's go. What was that, Mike?
Hey.
So after that completely normal behavior, we pick back up with Tucker and Dale in a flat bottom boat going night fishing. And I guess they've been out here for a little while because there's only one drink left in the ice chest and they get in a little argument over it. And then Tucker is telling Dale that he needs to stick up for himself or else. But then he also tells him,
do not even think about it.
But while they're having a good time, somebody close by is running around the woods with an axe. And Allison hears that whoever this is with this axe is running around close by to where she is as we see them sneak up behind her and it's just Chad.
Come on, that was funny.
No, it wasn't.
But if you thought that it was weird of him to do this, it gets even weirder as he basically tells Allison that they're perfect for each other and they need to be together. Then just goes in for the kiss that Allison doesn't want any part of.
Okay. Come on, stop.
Why?
Gross. Understandably, Allison thinks that all of this is weird and gross and walks away to find the rest of the group, who are just now making their way into the water, and Tucker and Dell are not far away from where they're all trying to swim. And as they're trying to remain quiet, figure out what to do, whether or not to let them know or just quietly disappear, they notice that Allison has made her way up onto a big rock, and then she notices them noticing her. Tucker and Dell, being the good old boys that they are, notice that she's not coming up quick enough, so they make their way over. Dell dives in and rescues her from the water. Right here, here's another spot where Dell saves somebody that should have died. Well, what do you mean she would have died? She just fell into the water. She was going to be okay. She hit her head, okay? She hit her head. She was going to drown. Dell jumps in and saves her life in this moment, which means we put her second on the list. But to the rest of the college kids, all they see is these two hillbillies in a boat taking one of their friends as Tucker stands up and yells,
We got your friend! Oh God! They got Allison!
And instead of talking back and forth, they do make the smart decision for a horror movie and just run away. Because I guess Chad is the leader of their group. They go to tell him and he is just throwing his axe around. That's not alarming at all, which I will say I do understand, because you have an axe, there's a tree, either you try to cut it down or you might want to throw the axe a little bit. But the part that the college kids don't fully understand as they make their way back over to where Allison was abducted is the fact that Tucker and Dell are now gone. They think that, of course, she was just taken, but Tucker and Dell are figuring they ran away. They literally left their friend. Now we need to help her because something's not right. Why is she unconscious? The next morning, Allison's probably the most confused out of everybody around as she wakes up in a bed in a random place with a big scary dog growling at her. Growling at her. It's just then as Allison's trying to piece together what is going on that Dell opens the door and slowly enters the room. Understandably, Allison begins to freak out, and Dell understands very quickly that it must be...
It's the pancakes! You hate pancakes? I'm gonna make you something else.
So he quickly leaves the room to go make something else for her for breakfast and leaves her there alone with Jangers. I just got to point out that Jangers is the best dog in any horror movie, and he's also got the best name. So if you're looking for a name for a dog, Jangers is it. He's not going on the list. He's too good of a boy. With Allison confused about pancakes, her friends are even more confused about what happened last night as Chuck begins to explain.
It looked like one of the guys was eating her face off.
Yeah, Chuck. That's what happened. To hearing this, Chad tries to be super manly about everything, and he's like, oh, we don't need the police. No, we can handle this our own selves. And Chuck's like, nah, man, I'm gonna go get the police. And he takes off running to the car since it's like his dad's ride and he's the only one that can drive it. But he full on trips in the background, but they cut it just before he hits the ground. There's no way that was on purpose. That was just so left in the movie. Assuming Chuck is okay and makes his way to the ride to go get the police, the rest of the group split up to see if they can find where these two creepy hillbillies are, and Jason is the one that actually finds the cabin and calls the rest of the group over there. Now back inside the cabin, Dell re-enters into Allison's room with bacon and eggs this time, so she doesn't get so scared of the pancakes. And then he does the absolute best thing that he can in this situation and just starts to answer all of her questions.
Me and Tucker,
It's so funny watching him try his hardest to answer her questions because we already know that he is not good at talking to the ladies. And of course, his answers make him seem even more like a creep to Allison, who already assumed that. So she just flat out asked him, were you spying on us?
No, we weren't spying. No, I swear to God, no, we were out there fishing.
Luckily, though, Dell slowly starts to bring it together for himself and is explaining to her, it was an accident. We saw you hit your head, which clearly she did. And then all of your friends ran away and she immediately is very upset by this, but Dale reassures her that she shouldn't blame them.
Don't be mad at them. Some people just aren't any good in a crisis.
And that hopefully they will come back this morning to get her. Then Dale explains a little bit more about where they're at and what's going on, that those are his clothes that she's wearing. The dog's name is Jangers, and Jangers is the best dog. Then Dale even explains that the place that they're at right now is their cabin, and it's basically one of their dreams that they've had, to be able to go in and fix it up, even though it might not look like much right now. Once again, I'm still jealous because I would love to have a place like this. And then finally, we get to a formal name exchange as Allison says that she is Allison and Dale does this.
Dale. Ducker. So my name is Dale.
I mean, he got there anyway, and with that, he goes to leave the room as Allison asks him, is there anything to do here?
Do you like board games?
While they're getting ready to play some trivia, we have the college kids outside trying to decide who is going to be the one to walk up to the door. They were having trouble deciding on who was going to be the one to walk up to the door, and after playing some rock, paper, scissors, they still wanted to argue, but Chad was the one that spoke up and said, Mitch, you're the one going to the door.
Just shut up and walk.
What's fixing to happen is all Chad's fault. So while Mitch begins to make his way to the front door, we have Tucker around back getting ready to cut up a log. And he doesn't realize it, but there's a big old bee nest on the inside of this log. Hold on, pull the list back up again. We have Tucker and then we have Allison so far. Both of them have been saved by Dell, but since Allison was saved last, that means that she is safe for now, but instead it should circle back over to Tucker again. And what exactly is fixing to happen right here? Oh, a weird accident where he cuts into a log and there's a bunch of bees and he's running like a crazy guy with a chainsaw in his hand? Problem is, there's already somebody else that is now interfering with what is fixing to happen. Poor Mitch. With all of these bees now attacking him, Tucker runs around from the back of the house to the front so he can put some distance between him and the things that are literally attacking his space. And as they're running, Mitch just sees a crazy guy with a chainsaw coming after him, turns and yells to everybody else to run, and then takes off running beside Tucker. So as the rest of the group takes off running through the woods to get away from whatever in the world's going on, Mitch is running as fast as he can to get away from Tucker, and Tucker's running as fast as he can to get away from all of the bees. But Mitch's biggest problem is that he's not paying attention to where he's running, only to what he is running away from, until he runs directly into a sharp stick. Like I said, poor Mitch. Put him on the list. Where the only thing to actually stop and see what happened to Mitch is one of the bees. Because it's trivia time. Quick, who's the 5th president of the United States?
Oh, that's too easy. That's James Monroe.
That's right. Your boy Dale's got it stored away in his memory bank because, as he puts it, he may be as dumb as a stump, but he can remember everything that he's ever heard. Here's when Allison gives him a compliment. And then Dale begins to ask her what her plans are for the future.
I'd make a really good therapist.
No, don't.
The support beam booby trap should have been the very first thing that they tried to fix before anything else in the house. But they can't fix it now because Tucker has just entered back into the house, and clearly he got stung a lot by those bees. And not only is he upset with the bees, he's also upset with Dale because this is supposed to be their time to fix up their house. But being the good friends that they are, Dale quickly makes up for it and begins to take out all of the stingers out of Tucker's face and everywhere. This is the kind of friend that you want. This is the kind of friend that you need. And Allison sees this and says, I should probably go and find my friends. When Dale quickly says,
No, you need to rest.
Because instead of her going to find her friends, Tucker and Dale are on the case, and they're gonna go find them for her. And maybe if they would have went sooner to find her friends wouldn't have been finding Mitch the way that he is right now.
They left his body here as a message.
Yeah.
Understandably, they all begin to freak out. Chad throws his axe again, and everybody's like, you got some issues, don't you?
What are you doing, man?
You have serious issues, you know that?
But before that can be addressed, Tucker and Dale are making their way closer and closer to them, where they walk up on the axe. But it's funny because the conversation that they're having is Dale explaining to Tucker how bad he beat Allison.
Smart little college girl like that, and I was beating the crap out of her.
In trivia. It's in trivia. This is one of the reasons that I love this movie so much, because it's writing like this that makes the college kids realize, oh no, their friend is being beaten inside of that cabin over there. We have to do something to save her. And everything that Tucker and Dell do just make it look even worse, which at the same time plays into and against the stereotype of crazy hillbillies off in the woods, you know, killing college kids. But the movie's not called College Kids versus Evil, it's called Tucker and Dell versus Evil. But the college kids, they only take it as how bad Allison has been beat, and they think it's even worse whenever Tucker and Dell leave a message for them about Allison. Back at the cabin, Tucker's throwing some wood into the wood chipper, and Dell's digging a hole when Allison comes walking up, and this is Dell's reaction. But Allison's question is, what are you digging this hole for? As Dell tries his hardest to just say that he's digging a hole for them to poop in, and completely stumbles over his sentence until Allison's like,
outhouse hole.
An outhouse hole.
And I guess being bored, she decides to jump in the hole with him and begin digging herself, which she immediately impresses Dell and explains that she grew up on a farm. But to all of her friends that now have weapons in hand, they see Allison and their first thought is,
He's making her dig her own grave.
because of course everything that is played up until this point makes the college kids believe this, to where they come up with the plan that they need to attack and save their friend.
Everybody have their weapons.
Now, it's not only their preconceived notions about these two random hillbillies off in the woods that has led them to this point and having these thoughts, but it's also been Chad that has been poking the bear in this way to get them to believe it. And he's also the one that gives the signal for them to go and run in and attack.
No!
And it's so funny because Dell notices them coming towards them and says,
Oh, good, look, your friends are here. Hey!
he says this as Todd is running at him with a spear. Now it's here that Allison notices what is happening and she goes to grab Dell, and Dell turns with the shovel, knocks her out. She grabs him, they fall into the hole, which then also causes Todd to miss with the spear, drop the spear, also fall into the hole, directly onto it as he slowly slides down, being impaled as Dell is freaking out for what is going on. We have to stop right here for a moment. We need to pull the list back up again because Tucker being saved from the last time means that death is now going to go back to Allison. But it's just in this moment that she gets knocked out again, which means that Todd has taken her place, and let's put him on the list. But it's not just him, because at this exact same time, Mike is fixing to try something on Tucker. It was here that I paused the movie to take some notes about everything that is happening as my two oldest decide to come back, I guess to avoid sleep for a little bit longer, and my oldest looks at the screen and asks if I'm watching one of my videos and what in the world I'm doing on the screen. So I just explained to her, that's not me, this is a movie. And she looks me in the eyes and says, oh, well, it looks like you because of the shirt. Okay.
You are a good-looking man. More or less.
At the same time all of this is going on with Dell, we have Mike trying his hardest to sneak up on Tucker with a pocket knife. And as he runs up behind him, he just jumps right over him into the wood chipper. And look there, Tucker has also avoided death again, and we can put Mike right next to Todd because by my understanding of what's going on here is that Todd and Mike basically die at the exact same time. And it's all because Chad said, go, 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 it's time to attack. Tucker's freaking out because he doesn't know what in the world's going on, and he grabs onto Mike's legs and he's trying to pull him out, but it's not working. It's just spraying blood everywhere. It even covers Chloe, and then finally the wood chipper just shuts down, which is not going to be fun for Tucker to fix or explain to anybody what happened.
You okay?
This movie here would be the first time within the Final Destination universe that we see somebody die from a wood chipper. Because by the end of the second Final Destination film, there are two people that survive, and we don't see them die, but they do have this in Final Destination 3 that tells us they did die from a wood chipper. And I can just imagine this is basically how it would have happened.
He just hooked himself right into the wood chipper. What?
Now, with Allison being knocked out again, Dell grabs her up, runs inside, and so does Tucker, and they're both freaking out because they don't know what in the world's going on. And as they're explaining back and forth what just happened, they come to the conclusion that it must be a pact that these college kids have made to end themselves off in the woods.
Oh my God, that makes so much sense.
I love that this is the conclusion that they come to, because what else would you think is going on here? All of these deaths are so insane to the outside observer. And it's the same thing that happens in the Final Destination franchise. The majority of people that are reading about everything after the fact are just thinking it's weird coincidences and that there's nothing more going on. Except in part 2, where there's this interview and this guy is explaining that death has a design and that he thinks he's figured out what is happening here, which is the same thing that is also happening in this movie.
He basically screwed up Death's plan. And that's what I'm trying to warn people about.
It's this logic that leads them to believe that they also want to kill Allison to make her a part of the pact, and that's why they're also upset, because they need her dead as well. And it's so funny because Dell comes to the right conclusion of, we need to call the cops to get somebody to figure out what exactly is going on and what we need to do from here. And Tucker just looks at him and says, how? How are we going to explain that these kids are doing this to themselves? I mean, what would you say? How would you start? There's no way that this looks good on their part.
Oh, howdy ho, officer. We've had a doozy of a day.
Everything here is so insane and going to be so hard to convince a cop that you didn't have any part of this.
Doesn't matter what happened. What matters is what looks like what happened.
Especially when you have the college kids trying to figure out what they're gonna do next, and you have Chad starting his villain arc at this point as he begins to monologue to the remaining 3 that are there.
There's no rules out here. It's us against them.
Which are Chloe, Jason, and Naomi. Now, the entire time, Chad has not wanted to get the cops involved, which is weird to all of us and even his friends, but he has his reasons for it. Reasons that we will see here very shortly.
And if you don't think you can handle that, well, maybe you deserve to die.
But luckily for them, they hear the cop car pulling back up, which means that Chuck has returned with help. And Chad is just mad about this. So when Chuck pulls up with the sheriff, he tells everybody to get in, but Chad stays at a distance. With his axe, of course. And it's just as Tucker and Dell are getting Mike's bottom half out of the wood chipper and begin to drag him to, I'm assuming, the hole that they were digging a second ago, that the sheriff pulls up. And Tucker immediately begins the monologue that sounded so insane to him a moment ago, directly to the sheriff.
We have had a doozy of a day.
A real doozy.
And of course, as they begin to explain then, all of these dead kids that are out here is not a part of something they did, but was some kind of crazy pact that they have going on. And of course, the sheriff doesn't buy it. And it's here that Dell also cuts in and says that they're trying to kill their other friend named Allison, who I just so happened to knock out, and she's currently unconscious in my bedroom. It's not looking good for either of them. And it's here that the sheriff that also pulled them over earlier begins to walk up to the cabin so they can go and see Allison inside. And he starts to remind them of what he already said, that they shouldn't have come up here because there is nothing good that can happen out here. And then also begins to tell them about the sentences that they might have to face in the very near future.
Officer, do we look like a couple psycho killers to you?
I mean, don't ask. I guess the third time's a charm, as the sheriff then leans back into the same support beam and gets a couple nails directly to the face.
How's he even walking right now, Tuck?
And very shortly later, this is the reason Chad is nowhere to be found, because this was not a part of the original plan. But when you have a character that seems to have too many answers to the reasons that people shouldn't be here,
I told you boys to stay away from this place, but you just didn't listen.
Death is gonna do his best to take them out of the equation. So for now, we're going to have to put the sheriff on his own separate list because he was not technically a part of Death's original design. He's basically just a bonus that will be important later on. So as the sheriff stumbles his way outside and Tucker and Dale are following after him, the kids in the car are freaking out and Chuck decides he's going to grab the sheriff's gun. That doesn't work out either.
Don't do it!
Chuck here, on the other hand, can get at it right underneath Mike and Todd. Now I know what you're thinking, well, what about Allison and Tucker? It's supposed to circle back and get them since they're still alive. But Allison is currently unconscious, so according to the way that it works in the Final Destination franchise, if you are somewhere that death can't get to you, or you're not conscious of what is fixing to happen, then you're safe for some reason. I'll explain all of that here in a little bit because it's going to come up with Chad's backstory. But be assured, Tucker is technically the next one that should come up on Death's list as it circles back to him. And it's going to attempt it here very shortly. So, with Chuck no more, Chad runs out of the woods and grabs the gun and begins blasting at both Tucker and Dale as they run back inside and try to hide. All while this is going on, Tucker is just steadily blaming Dale for everything that has happened, and Dale looks at him and says, "This is all because we went fishing."
I don't even like fishing.
You don't like... What do you mean you don't like fishing?
This statement causes their little fight that they're having to basically end as there's a few more gunshots, and Dale realizes that Changers is missing. So he quickly gets to where he can see outside, and Chad has Changers at gunpoint. It's at this that Tucker grabs the nail gun and gives it to Dale and tells him to cover me as he is going to go and rescue Changers. But Dale looks at him and says, "I've never shot anyone before."
Think of them like moving 2x4s.
Oh!
And then Dale almost shoots Tucker just immediately. Now I know what you were thinking. Oh, it was the gunshots, the part that was supposed to kill Tucker. That wasn't it. I believe that it was actually this nail that should have shot him right here. But the reason that it didn't hit him is because this is Dale we're talking about. We can't have Dale taking out Tucker because this is Tucker and Dale versus evil. Death can try, but Dale is going to put up a fight. So then Dale smashes the window and begins shooting over at Chad and everybody that's outside so Tucker can make his way out there to attempt something. And we hear Chad yell at them that if you shoot at us again, I'm going to kill your dog.
If you kill my dog, I swear to God, I'll get really mad.
As quiet as he can, Tucker makes his way over to where he can untie Changers and then is immediately spotted by Chad and the rest of the kids. So he jumps up and he begins to run through the woods, sadly trips and falls and hides behind a log to where he's then found and knocked out by Chad. And they're not looking to play either because they string up Tucker from his ankles upside down in the woods to dangle there as Chad gets right up in his face and tells him, "I've never stood so close to pure evil before." And then does this.
It kind of stinks.
What is up with people sniffing stuff in this movie? It's here that Tucker uses his understanding of college kids and begins to bargain with them, saying that he's got like 10 or 12 beers left in his cooler. They can just have them. As long as they'll let him go, they can just call this even and head their way. But Chad's not going to let that slide as he looks at him and says, "This is for Mike."
No! That is not!
Now, if it wasn't for that nail that was shot a while ago, or if you want to count the gunshots, they could have killed off Tucker here because in Death's design, he was going to be next. But because he avoided it again, it had to move on to somebody else, which means Chad also had to move on to somebody else. Back in the cabin, Allison begins to wake up and Dale immediately starts crying. And just before he begins to explain what in the world all just took place, he asks her,
Do some of your friends take medication?
Dale, it's a good question to ask, but Chad here is being used by something way worse than just his broken brain.
Why?
Because I think they forgot to take it.
And then starts to rattle off that they're trying to kill Tucker, they're trying to kill Changers, they've been trying to kill themselves, they're also trying to kill himself and her. And just as she tries to calm him down, there's a knock at the door. She gets up to walk over there, opening the front to see all of the massacre that is around there and something wrapped up in cloth. As she then picks it up and brings it back inside, and Dale immediately notices that this is from Tucker's shirt. and he also recognizes what is inside.
Oh my God! They cut off his bowling fingers!
I laughed way too hard at this when I was taking my notes. How would he know? How would he know? I just love this movie so much. But there's also a note with the bowling fingers that says, now we've got your friend, try and get him. This sets Dell off and he jumps up and grabs a machete to go and save his best friend, but Allison looks at him and tries to calm him down, saying that we don't need to escalate this. They were probably just thinking that you were trying to hurt me.
Oh, and why would they think that?
And it's at this that the truth finally comes out, as Dell is no longer the one stumbling over his words, but instead it's Allison, as she tries to explain that when they first saw them, they thought that they were creepy.
You thought that I looked like some kind of freak.
We misjudged you, Dale.
To go from one of the funniest moments in this film to this scene is such a shift, and it's just another reason that I love this movie so much. And with this surprisingly heartfelt moment, Allison is realizing the problem of her own actions in everything that has happened, and Dale looks at her and says,
I should have known that if a guy like me talked to a girl like you, somebody'd end up dead.
Okay, it's a bit extreme. But to make it even more extreme, Dell then sets off to go and save his friend Tucker and tells Allison one last message, that if she sees her friends again, be sure to let them know I never wanted to hurt anybody. Now, as Dell is running through the woods as fast as he can to find his friend, he actually finds his hat first, as well as Mitch. And then not far off, he does find Tucker, but it's a trap.
Oh no, Tucker! I won't die, please!
Which Dell sets off almost immediately, and a spear flies right into his pants. And with that close call, Dell walks over, cuts Tucker down, which probably hurts Tucker quite a bit more. And then Tucker just looks at him and says,
This vacation sucks.
Back in the cabin, Chad and Naomi are slowly making their way in to save Allison from whatever is going on here, but Allison just looks at him and says, nobody's here, it's just me. Then Chad just flat out asks, what have they done to you, Allison? And she's like, nothing. This is one big misunderstanding. And his reaction is, we have to burn this place to the ground.
We have to burn this place to the ground.
We have to burn this place to the ground. Kind of a waste of a waterproof match. Even more to this, Allison's trying her hardest to just say, everything that has happened has just been accident after accident. None of this was intentional. We all just need to calm down. And Naomi begins to explain, I've heard of this before. It's called Stockholm Syndrome. And Chad begins another villain monologue and looks at her and says,
Tell me you're not falling in love with that freak.
He then just puts the axe to Allison's throat, luckily, as Tucker and Dell are walking back into the cabin. And to this, Dell calls out for Allie, which is what her friends call her, and this causes Chad to freak out even more. But then Allie calms everybody down and finally gets them to sit down at the table as she makes some tea and just tries to get everybody to talk it out, which is exactly what she explained to Dale earlier that she wanted to do with her future with being a therapist.
Is that chamomile tea? Because I can't have that.
This line I keep forgetting about, even in my notes. I completely forgot about it. This line is so important to how everything plays out. Keep it in mind. So to get everyone started, Chad begins telling his side of the story. And he starts with the massacre that happened 20 years ago and how his parents were actually two of the teenagers that were there, and how his dad died because of one of the hillbillies, but his mom made it out. She didn't realize that she was pregnant, and she ends up giving birth to Chad and then is shortly institutionalized afterwards. And everybody there is just like, okay, how does that apply to what is going on here? This is what I was talking about earlier. Chad's backstory plays into all of this so much more than what you would have thought from the beginning, because Chad shouldn't be here. But from a terrible event that happened 20 years ago, Chad survived, which then caused his mom to survive, but also his mom is still alive because he says that she got locked up in a mental asylum, just like what happened with Clear Rivers in Final Destination 2. Where as long as she was inside the mental asylum in the padded room, she was safe and death didn't bother her. At least for the time being, until she gets approached in the second movie and then they're like, hey, it's happening again. And she thought it was a good idea to go and help. If you haven't seen the Final Destination movies, I just spoiled a lot for you from the first to the second one. If you're watching this, I'm sorry, but you should have known that. But it's that reasoning, and also the fact that we see a bunch of the people are sleeping through the Final Destination movies and are fine. Like, I can't think of anybody that was asleep and something happened to them other than seeing like visions or, you know, creepy hands coming through the window. They all seem to be okay at nighttime when they're unconscious. And that's the reason that Allison is still on the list and hasn't been circled back to, because she hasn't been awake for most of this. And what is happening now outside is that Jason and Chloe are making their way up to the outside of the cabin because Chad told them that if they were gone more than 15 minutes...
We come in guns blazing.
What was that? Who told Jason and Chloe that they needed to bust in and save the day if something doesn't go according to a certain timeline? It was Chad.
Chad said...
This is all Chad's fault. Have you not figured it out yet? It's all Chad's fault. Back at the table, Dale begins to say that he's sorry, but there's no way that he had anything to do with it, or his parents, because he was only 6 at the time. Which kind of makes me feel old, knowing that at this time I'm older than Dale. So anyway, he then explains that he couldn't hurt anyone. He doesn't even want to hurt a fish. And that's it. And now he...
I feel like a weight. Yeah, I feel good.
Great.
Just then is whenever Jason comes running in with the weed eater and goes to attack Tucker because he was the one that jumped up. Hold on. Jason here is fixing to attack Tucker. But if he attacks Tucker, that is going to mess up Death's design because Allison is now awake. Allison is the next one on the list and not Tucker. So with this understanding and seeing that Tucker is fixing to jump out of the way, we know that whoever is fixing to get attacked is not going to have a fatal wound, or else this entire list is going to be messed up and this theory's not going to make any sense. But he jumps out of the way just in time and Naomi loses her face. So with all of this chaos going on, Chad then flips the table onto Dale, tries to chop Dale, then hits Allison, then gets hit by Tucker, then tries to throw an oil lamp at them. He misses. He hits Jason though. Jason's foot is now on fire. And then Chloe thinks that she's gonna help by grabbing a jar of water and throwing it onto him. Sadly for Jason, it was moonshine, so he goes up in flames. Chloe puts out her cigarette. Tucker, Dale, and Allison run outside before the house explodes because of all of the gas that was poured all over it. And just as Chad goes to make his way out there, he's stopped by Naomi. Which means he doesn't make it before the whole cabin explodes.
My cabin.
I'm a terrible therapist.
Yeah, she might want to change majors after all that. What'd I tell you? Allison should have been in here because she was next on the list, but because they made it out, that means that Jason, Chloe, and Naomi, they didn't survive this. And neither should have Chad, but Chad's not playing by the same rules that everybody else is. But before we get to that, we're going to put Jason first because Jason was very much on fire. I wouldn't say that he had died beforehand because he was still stumbling around when the explosion happened. So that would have been the end of Jason. And then we have Naomi next because she's already missing like part of her face from catching a weed eater to it. Then after that is Chloe, who just got caught up in the explosion. And Chad should be here on the list, but instead he does this. So the three of them being completely freaked out, they jump in the truck and take off, and Dale is too busy looking back to see Chad slowly limping after them and not looking at the tree that they drive into. Oh, Dale, what are you doing? You gotta pay attention to where you're going and not be looking back at the crazy Chad back there. But luckily we don't have to worry about Jangers, the best dog ever, because he's completely okay. He's just wanting to check up to see what in the world happened. And that's a question that we can answer with the list in Death's design, because that entire explosion that just happened was meant for Allison. It should have taken her out, but it didn't. And because we're having to work off of Death's design, that's the reason that Chad didn't just go ahead and take out Dale at the same time that he stabbed Tucker. which means that somehow, in some way, all of this has worked out so far and is now circled back to try to take out Tucker through him bleeding out in this moment. But once more, what is this movie called? Tucker and Dale versus evil. They're not going down without a fight, which also tells us that if Tucker can hang on, the next one that should be on the list is not Chad, but instead is going to be Dale. And then after Dale, it'll circle back up to Allison, and then it'll come back down to Chad. Got that? That's what we're going to see if it plays out. And if this works out, you know that I'm not just making this up. You know that there's something going on here with this movie. I'm not crazy. Tucker, on the other hand, is propped up against the tree as he begins to tell Dale that he tried his hardest to stop Chad, but he took Allison. He begins to talk Dale up, reminding him of how good he was at catching frogs when they were a kid, even telling him that him and Allison will be able to get together once he saves her.
What I'm trying to tell you is that you're better than you think you are.
Really going all in to encourage his friend the best that he can to go and get his girl back.
Friends forever. Best friends forever.
And then the very sweet moment is ruined by Dale grabbing Tucker's hurt hand. But with that, Dale sets off with Jangers to go and find Chad and Allison. And after running for what must have been a while, they finally come up on a lumber mill, which is where Chad and Allison currently are. And Chad has gone full-on villain mode because not only does he have Allison tied up, but he has her tied up on a log, ready to be sawn in two. But before Dale goes to confront Chad, he decides to do what Chad has wanted this whole time and become that killer hillbilly. With the chainsaw and welding mask, of course, this scares Allison. He quickly is like, I put this stuff on because I thought it might make me look more intimidating.
Does it?
Yeah.
Sweet.
So as Dale walks over to start to untie Allison, we hear Chad begin another villain dialogue as he also begins to turn on all of the power, including the saw, which means Dale has to act fast, so he uses his own saw to try to get Allison out as Chad jumps and kicks him right in the face. Here is where the fight begins, as there's kicks, there's punches, there's a face full of saw, and as Tucker pulls off the most epic of axe throws and saves Allison at the very last second. But the fight's not over yet as Chad swings a steel pipe and Dale has the chainsaw again and they're going back and forth. Dale goes for a headshot and it's blocked. He goes for a crotch shot, it's blocked. He goes for the head again. He saws the pipe in half and then throws the chainsaw to Chad. Well, why? All right, we can take a breath here because a lot just happened and I already laid it out for you. All of this tells us that Tucker is still alive because Dale should have been next on the list and Chad tried to take him out, but Dale avoids it because, of course, it's Tucker and Dale versus evil. He's fighting off death, which means that it would have circled back up to Allison, but Allison was just saved by Dale, so that means she's going to go free, and instead it skips all the way down to the next person, which is Chad, because he's the last one on the list. And that's just the reason that I'm not going to count this as a way for him to die, because he catches the chainsaw. He's completely fine. It's just like a weird distraction because Dale is a really good guy and he doesn't want to kill anybody in this movie. He even said it earlier.
But I never wanted to hurt anybody.
Which can only leave us with one conclusion, and that's that Chad should be next. Clearly not thinking about that decision for very long, he runs away, grabs Allison, and they head upstairs, I guess to prepare for round 3. Because as Dale's trying to find another weapon to fight off Chad, Allison finds a newspaper clipping of what really happened 20 years ago.
He looks just like that Kentucky Fried College kid down there.
Yeah.
As they realize that Chad's real father was one of the hillbillies.
No. No!
It's true, Chad. You're half hillbilly.
Hearing this, Chad becomes even angrier as he goes in for the final blow, but Dale uses his secret weapon and throws chamomile tea right into his face. At chamomile tea, I told you that line from earlier was important. It came back.
Like I said, I remember weird stuff.
But Dale clarifies to Allison he'll be okay as long as we get him his inhaler. Just as Chad begins to stumble backwards and falls out of the second-story barn door. As they look on in horror, realizing that there's no way Chad could have survived the fall. and they slowly shut the door. Well, Chad, if you would have listened to me and my insane theory, you would have known that this is how it had to play out. This is Death's design. But we also know that he is still alive. He didn't die here because of what happened in the beginning with the cameraman and the journalist, which I'll explain how they play in here in just a moment. And it cuts to a police scene, where we also see the same news reporter that we saw in the very beginning reporting on everything that has just happened, as the camera then slowly pans back to show us that we are watching this on a TV from Tucker's room in the hospital, where Tucker is as high as can be on his prescription meds, and Dell is entering in to talk to his best friend to see how he's doing. And the best news that Tucker has is that they found both of his fingers.
They look funny to you?
No, not really.
And to celebrate this, Dell tells him that he has a surprise for him and to close his eyes, as he then gives him a PBR with a bow wrapped around it and a straw. It's after this that Tucker then looks at his best friend Dell and asks him, how was Allison? What happened? And Dell tries to play it off at first like he wasn't man enough to ask her out or anything, until he finally reveals,
We're going bowling.
and it's here in the bowling alley that now Dell is the confident one, and he begins to talk up his buddy BJ to get him to go and talk to the girls that are over there.
Don't be nervous and just be yourself, okay?
So as BJ heads off, Allison sits down with Dell, and Dell gives her a present, which is a helmet, so that way she can stay safe and stop getting knocked out so much. Because at this point, she's probably got some brain damage or something going on. And it's with this gift that Dell begins to attempt to explain how he really feels about Allison, when she finally just leans in and gives him a kiss. And then we hear a woman scream in the background as BJ accidentally hits this girl.
BJ!
And as Dell and Allison look to see what is going on now, they finally decide that it's probably not worth it and just go right back to kissing, and we get credits. So somehow we did follow Death's design the same way that it seems to work out in the Final Destination movies. But the only thing is that there were 11 people that should have died in the accident in the beginning. But instead, we only had 10 people that died in this movie. And because of Chad, these extra names over here with the sheriff, the cameraman, and the journalist, they are going to cover Allison, Tucker, and Dell, because Chad messed up. This was not Death's design, and from Chad making a deal with Death and then messing with his design is going to be the next one on the list, and the one that shouldn't have been here in the first place, and that caused Death to make all of this happen to begin with, and now to be the one that Death is after most. Now, I know what you're thinking. That didn't happen in any of the movies, but that's just the thing. I'm not saying that this is a part of the canon universe of Final Destination. Because in the Final Destination films, there's a few of them that have alternate endings that play out much differently than what Death intends. But none of these are counted as part of the true canon. And while you might have known about the alternate endings, you might not know about the comics or the books that are a part of the Final Destination universe. The important thing is that none of the books and none of the comics are a part of the canon that happens within the Final Destination franchise, because it's in the 5th Final Destination book called Looks Could Kill that this exact same thing happens. The main character Sherry does this exact thing where after some stuff happens, she then makes a deal with Death so she can continue on in her career, but then she has to help Death and sacrifice her friends. And some quick spoilers for the book if you do want to skip ahead because you plan on reading the Final Destination books that you just learned about. But our main character, Sherry, does also betray Death and gets taken out by him by the end. So from the way that I see it and the way that it's played out before in the Final Destination universe, I believe that Chad is now the only one left on death's list. He's not going to get away. Like, there's no way that he's going to survive. He no longer has the protection around him to survive another explosion or having an allergic reaction to some chamomile or falling out of a second-story building. It's gone. All of it's gone, and Chad is now the only one left on death's list, and he's not gonna make it. But who knows? All we really needed was a couple extra minutes in that bowling alley where Chad would have walked in and maybe got attacked by BJ or something, and then death shows up and it gets all crazy again as the cycle starts over, because that's how the Final Destination franchise works.
You can't cheat death. There are no escapes.
With all of its insane rules, it doesn't matter where you go or what you're doing, the cycle must continue.
The design is flawed. It can be beaten.
If you've watched the Final Destination films, you know that these rules that they have in every single movie are extremely confusing.
My theory, this proves that death checks back in between the kills.
So Chad most likely would have had his premonition of everything that should have happened during the car wreck in the very beginning, but instead it's avoided and death is now after him. And I'm thinking when he disappears in the convenience store, that's when he decides that he's going to talk to death about this.
Don't you get it? This is what it's all about.
Then making a deal with death to go through the list as long as he gets to live.
I mean, a few little tiny murders, and everyone just freaks out.
Now, after everything that happened, we have our list, and we can also piece together how everybody here would have died. So starting off with Tucker, who multiple times should have died from either getting cut or stabbed by something sharp. So most likely part of the glass would have flown and like stabbed into him. That would have been it for him. Then we have Allison. It seems pretty clear with the amount of times that she got hit in the head that that's how she would have died. She would have hit her head on something and that would have been it.
Especially because she always falling down and hitting her head.
Then we have Mitch. I think it's pretty clear what would have happened to him. It would have been the same as what happened to him out in the woods. He would have just went flying out of the car and done the same thing. And I'm guessing the same thing would have happened to Todd as well, that he would have flown into something sharp and ended the same way. Now, Mike here, I'm not saying that there was a wood chipper off in the woods and he would have flown into it, as weird as that would have been. Instead, he would have flown into a tree. There would have been wood chips that went everywhere, or he would have, you know, hit something so hard that half of his body just disappears. It's just so stupid. After that, we have Chuck, which I doubt there was a gun anywhere in the car. They would have used it at some point. Instead, there would have been something that exploded in the car and shot him, basically. After that, we have Jason, Naomi, and Chloe. And of course, they would have died inside the car as it exploded. But I'm thinking Naomi probably would have flown out of the car, but still been close enough by as she, I guess, slides on the asphalt on her face. I know all of that sounds so insane, but have you seen a Final Destination movie? Just watch part 2. All of this same stuff basically happens in it. Only difference is, in every single one of the Final Destination movies, it's even more insane than what I just described. But that still leaves Chad, and from what I can gather from him being in the front seat, he would have flown out, hit his body so hard against something, just like how he fell out of the barn, but he wouldn't have died right away. Instead, he would have lived a little while to meet with death to talk about what happened. And since we're watching this from Tucker and Dale's perspective, we're also outsiders to what is really going on here. And the same thing with the Final Destination franchise, all of the kills would just look insane to an outsider.
Are you listening to yourself? I mean, this is crazy.
Just as it does here, where it's this crazy sequence of events that lead to one death after another, making its way through the full lineup.
Mere coincidence would have 1 or 2 of these kids die, but not all of them.
Where all the while, Chad knows that some of this stuff is going to happen, but he doesn't tell anybody and keeps it all a secret because he is currently working with death. That's the reason that he's the one saying, you're going to be the one to go and knock on the door. You're going to be the one to do this. You need to go. Everybody move in, run and try to attack these guys. And it's just like time after time, Chad is the reason that everybody runs directly into their own deaths.
I mean, whose stupid idea was this?
Chad.
And the event that would have started all of this was the massacre that happened 20 years ago, when Chad was conceived with one of the hillbillies, which would have caused the new life rule to then apply. But now 20 years later, death is coming back to take care of the leftovers that are on the list.
Because in the end, no one can escape death.
But from our outsider's perspective, we can all just be happy with the ending, knowing that Dell finally got the girl. And that Tucker got his fingers back. And I know all of that was a lot and probably the most insane theory that I've ever covered on this channel. Like I said, I am not crazy. All of this worked out way better than what I thought it was going to before I started recording this part. I've spent like 6 months working on the outline for this video, and it wouldn't fall into place until right now, and it's so amazing that it worked out. And if there's any flaws in this, please let me know down in the comments. And while you're going down there, be sure to check out the merch. It's right down there for you to check out. And I thank you so much, because this was, like I said in the beginning, the 50K subscriber special. And I hope that you think this whole thing was special enough for that. But I just love this movie so much and figured that I would share some of the insane thoughts that I've had. And how, once again, when I started to do research for this months ago, I found that it's not even an original idea. But it was still fun enough that I had to do something for y'all. And now I guess it also counts for 60, 70, and 80,000 subs, which is insane. And I thank you all so much for that. And a huge thank you to all of our channel members. Some of these guys have been here for a very long time, and that is so insane to me. Thank you especially for that. But before you go, here's another one of my theories right here, and here's all of my favorite films that I watched in 2024. And I would love to hear your thoughts on how this theory either works or doesn't work in your mind, and any other theories that you have, because some of the more insane sounding ones are the funnest ones. But with all of that, I hope that you have an extra blessed day, and that I'll see you in the next one.